Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar hosted by Thawra TV. Eid Mubarak للجميع. My name is Wissam Yafi, and the purpose of today's webinar is for all of us to learn together about Bisri in an objective, rational way. I hope people will see today's webinar as an educational rather than a political one. Our objective, as always, is to showcase the issue and understand the problems, think about alternatives, and in the process, scientifically shed light about the possibilities. Before I introduce our guest today, Roland Nassour, I would like to thank the organizers of today's event, including Thawra TV and CCG and Ana Al-Qarar. As with previous webinars, this one is transparent and open to public participation. It is being held in English because of its global reach and the interest of our expat community. But as always نحن فخورين بلغتنا العربية. So إذا حدا عنده أي أسئلة بحب يطرحها باللغة العربية طبعا رولان وأنا بنقدر نساعدكم ونجاوبكم بفخر. So please free to pose your questions in either English or Arabic. In terms of today's format, we will delve straight into the questions that will be in 4 sections. The first is a background on Bisri that we would like Roland to share with us, followed by specifications of the project, the proposed project, the dam project, and issues with the project. The third section will deal with alternatives for Lebanon as it pertains to Bisri, especially for Beirut and the Dahiya. And finally, we will be looking forward with respect to water supply to Lebanon in general and to Beirut. After each section, as a moderator, I will be taking questions from the audience. And to ask a question, please do so via Facebook and the text, via text. One short personal note, I'm very proud to be doing this session. I have a family who lives in Dahiya, so I know a lot of the water would be going to Dahiya, so I want to make sure that we provide clean water and that we provide the solutions that are beneficial to our brothers and sisters in Dahiya and the rest of Beirut, be it through whatever solutions that are going to be discussed. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Roland Nassour. Roland is an urban planner and designer, co-founder and coordinator of the Save the Bisri Valley campaign. Roland participated in different campaigns against certain dam projects in Lebanon since 2014, advocating for alternative and environmental solutions for water supply. Through his research and his work, Roland is interested in making cities and regions more livable, resilient, and sustainable. Roland has worked in the field of urban design and architecture in Beirut, as well as in Europe, specifically in Denmark, has participated in projects to revive streets and public spaces in different cities around the world. He also contributed to research and workshops on air pollution, plastic litter, and the right to housing. Roland holds a master's degree in urban planning and policy from the American University of Beirut, a master's degree in architecture from the Lebanese University. He studied urban management tools of climate change at Erasmus University in the Netherlands and sustainable urban design at Lund University in Sweden. Roland, ahla wa sahla, welcome.
Thank you, shukran.
Roland, I would like us to start today by you giving us a little bit of a description about what Marj Bisri is all about, and what do you think it represents, Lebanon, and specifically maybe Beirut, environmentally, but also from different perspectives.
Okay. Marj Bisri is a valley between the Mount Lebanon Governorate and the south of Lebanon, between Jizin and Shuf mainly. It's one of the most important landscapes of Lebanon, according to the National Physical Master Plan, that recommended to classify the Bisri Valley as one of the main 6 regional natural parks in Lebanon. It holds a unique cultural value because it used to connect the Phoenician coastal cities of Lebanon, with the Bekaa Valley, and even further with Damascus in Syria. That justifies the abundance of archaeological and historical sites in the valley. We're talking about 60 to 80 historical sites, including a Roman temple, tombs, bridges, human settlements, cities, villages. So it's really abundant with historical vestiges. It also holds a fertile agricultural plain where many types of fruits and vegetables are cultivated for centuries now. And there is a strong connection between the villages surrounding the valley and the valley itself, because people make their living out of the valley. It's also part of their memories, of their emotional attachment to the area. So it really holds an important value for at the national scale, but also for the local community. There's also many woodlands and forests in the area, including pine woodlands and oak forests that will be deeply or strongly affected by the building of the dam.
Why do you think, Roland, this specific area was chosen? You know, realizing how rich it is from a historical, from an agricultural, from an environmental, ecological perspective. Why do you think this specific site was chosen for them, and when was this chosen?
Yeah. First of all, every single valley in Lebanon is considered as a potential site for a dam according to the National Water Strategy of Lebanon. So basically, if this strategy is implemented, there will be no natural valley left in Lebanon. So it's the same as any other valley in Lebanon that is threatened by a dam project. The Bisri Dam project dates back to the 1950s, in the Cold War era, where the United States wanted to disseminate its development models to try to counter the ideological war of the Soviet Union. So they wanted to copy the models implemented in the States, mainly the Tennessee Valley water development model, in the Arab world. And the Bisri Dam and the Karaun Dam were among the first projects to be implemented according to this strategy. The Lebanese politicians and experts back then had a different vision. They wanted to counter the nascent Israel with a plan to seize Lebanon's water and divert it at the farthest possible from Israel's reach. So the plan for the Lebanese politicians was to build the Karaun and the Bisri Dam and convey the water to Beirut. So these two geopolitical visions converged into this project. But in the beginning, it was only the Karaun Dam that was built and part of the tunnel that conveys water to Beirut. But because of biophysical problems and many landslides and other problems in the tunnel, the United States Bureau of Reclamation withdrew from the project, and the Bisri Dam was not built back then. So the project remained on paper only for years. In the 70s, it was managed by the Litani River Authority, and later CDR took charge of the project, but it wasn't really put into serious consideration until 2012.
Okay. Now, Araon, my understanding is Araon is more for hydro and irrigation, whereas Bisri is meant for water.
Yes.
So one of the questions I have is there, part of the plan is to link the Araon one with the Bisri one. how do you turn hydro and irrigation water, which is typically much less sanitized, if you will, much less clean, to drinking water from one dam to the other? Is that normal? Is that how it's usually done? Because it doesn't sound.
Yes, it's not very common. And actually, there are different projects to make use of the Karaun Dam that contradict each other. There are projects to funnel water to the south for irrigation, and there is another project to divert water to Beirut. And there's not enough water for both projects. So this is really funny because there's two decrees by the government that contradict each other. So you need to choose. It's either for the south and the Bekaa or for Beirut. And it doesn't work either way because the dam is extremely polluted now, and it cannot really be used neither for irrigation nor for domestic use.
Araun, you mean?
Yes.
I heard that it would take more than 7 years to basically depollute Araun. Is this correct?
On paper, yes, but if you want to be realistic and consider the local conditions in Lebanon, it would take way more than that. Yeah, and the project should have already started years ago, and now nothing has been implemented yet. So we really cannot expect any serious solution for the Karaun Dam within 15 or 20 years.
So if we take, for example, I know there's been before, I know there's been a lot of opposition to Bisri. Why isn't there a similar type of opposition for all the pollution that seems to be arising from Araun? Is Araun, is it because of the irrigation and hydro that it's not feeding people and people aren't getting sick? Or, I mean, and should people expect Bisri to become as polluted as Araun is today?
Yeah, to answer your first question, the problem of the Karaun Dam did not appear suddenly. It accumulated with time. So people got used to its problem slowly, whereas in the case of the Bisri Dam, there is a project to be built and people don't want it to be built at all. So there is a different dynamics.
Okay.
I think that we can expect that any dam project in Lebanon to lead to this rate of pollution like the Karaun Dam, because all the sewage, all the industrial waste are not being treated in Lebanon. We're talking about 98% of the sewage is not being treated, despite the $1.4 billion that were already spent on water treatment plants in Lebanon through loans, like foreign loans, and most of the treatment plants are not operating, are not functioning because of some problems between CDR and the Ministry of Energy and Water and the local water establishments. So each institution blames the other. So there is a serious institutional dysfunctioning here.
Okay, we'll come back to this and to Law 221. So we know now that the project has essentially opposition when it comes to its environmental, ecological, historical significance, etc. Tell me a little bit more about what's been happening from a people and community perspective. What has really been happening, and what kind of opposition have the people been providing, and what has it led to? How has it affected people and you and others?
Yeah. The people have been protesting against the Bisri Dam since 2015. There is lawsuits against the project submitted to the Shura Council in Lebanon in 2018.
Equivalent of the Supreme Court in Lebanon.
Exactly. There are complaints submitted to the inspection panel in the World Bank in 2018 and in 2019. There are scientific dossiers that have been compiled for years now that show the disastrous impact of the dam. People have been protesting in the valley, organizing direct action and demonstrations in the valley, but also in Beirut, in front of the CDR offices and in front of the World Bank headquarters. And in 2019, during the Thawra, the revolution in Lebanon in October, people from all over Lebanon came to the valley and opened the gates of the valley that the CDR had installed to prevent people from entering. So the revolutionaries opened the gates and camped in the valley and forced the contractor out of the site. And the construction works have been postponed or stopped since then. So today, because of the people's will and actions, the project is not being implemented.
Has there been any violence?
Yes, of course. The government has been using excessive force against protesters in the valley. Every time we organized a protest of 20 to 30 people, we would be faced with 200 military members to try to tell us that you have no chance of getting or of accessing the valley anymore. There have been physical attacks on us, many tactics of propaganda and accusations of treason, because the government believes or tries to make people believe that anyone who opposes water projects in Lebanon must be affiliated with Lebanon's enemies because they don't want water security in Lebanon, and all these fake claims, you know.
Right, because dams are very easy to bomb, and so if we discuss water security, having an underground aquifer or reservoir is a lot safer from a water security perspective than a dam, which could be bombed very easily.
Yes, exactly. And if a dam is bombed, like in the case of the Bisri Dam, there's a study of the dam breach scenario that shows that 3 villages will be completely drowned in minutes if the dam breaches. So we're putting these villages under serious risk from the safety point of view. And if we want to talk about resistance and the war with Israel, for example, in the occupied territories, the rates of losses in the distribution network is 10%. It's the best in the world. Whilst the rates of losses in the network in Lebanon is almost 50%. So if we want to, so if we want to protect our water resources, we should start here. We should start by reducing the losses and the unaccounted for water.
I want us to move on to some of the specifics. I have here a couple of comments, first of all, that I want to highlight. Karen Khayber says, if I'm not mistaken, our own region has one of the highest cancer rates in Lebanon. Is that correct scientifically?
Absolutely, absolutely. In some villages around the Karawan Dam, the rates of cancer are 4 times higher than the national average.
And Sam Haj says بيقول في حلول متوفرة وهي أرخص وأسرع وممكن توفير المياه للناس, which means there are easier solutions that are quicker, less expensive, and safer for people. I want to move to the topic of the technical specifications of the dam, just to understand what is being promised and what can really be delivered, and if there are any difference with that. So how much water is the proposed Bisri Dam supposed to provide, and how much is it likely to provide?
Yeah. The World Bank claims that the dam will store 125 million cubic meters and that it will provide around 70 to 100 million cubic meters to the greater Beirut area every year. However, recent measurements of the river flow in Bisri show that the yearly average does not exceed 80 million cubic meters, which means that it will never be able to provide the greater Beirut area with the claimed numbers. And if we deduct from the 80 million...
that study conducted by, sorry to interrupt you, Roland, that study of the 80, who was it conducted?
Yes, it is the official measurements from the Litani River Authority.
Okay.
It's the same source of the World Bank, but the World Bank and the Lebanese government stopped measuring or updating the river flow data in 2012. Why? Because they noticed that due to climate change, the trend or the curve of the river flow is declining. So they decided to stop updating the data in order to justify this large and exaggerated dam size. So today, when we updated the data ourselves as activists and experts, we noticed that the decrease in the river flow is really dramatic. And we now have only 80 million cubic meters as an average river flow. So if we deduct from this 80 million cubic meters, the rates of infiltration, the rates of evaporation, the minimum water level that needs to be kept in the reservoir, and the environmental flow of the river, we would be left with around 40 to 45 million cubic meters for Beirut. Ironically, this same number is the actual losses or equals the actual losses in the public distribution network. So it is really unrealistic to destroy all this valley and to spend 1.2 billion US dollars on this project, while we can do the same or we can provide the same amount by only rehabilitating the distribution network. This before talking about additional sources that are actually available within the greater Beirut area.
So we're saying essentially in layman terms that if we just save on what's coming from other springs and other sources like Ja'ita, and others, if we just save on the losses, we don't even have to build a dam. We would build the same amount of water that is expected to be provisioned. Now, this assuming is what is needed. But what if the need is more? What if the need in the Beirut area is more than this 40, than the loss? What if the need is, as you know, and as I said before, I have a family in Dahi, and I remember when I was a kid, I would go there and the water was very sweet. My family comes from Burj Al Braj, my mother's family, and the water was very sweet. And so the trees would grow there. There was beautiful orange trees and lemon trees and avocado trees. And it was because of the sweet water. Now, when I visit, many decades later, the water has become salty. And there's an invasion of water, it appears, from the sea because of over-extraction. So clearly the need is there. The question I guess I'd like to pose to you, Roland, is if we compensate for the losses, say the 40, does that compensate for the overall need of Beirut, Dahi, and the others? And if not, what other sources are available without getting into the alternatives, because that's the third section of our conversation. But what is the amount of the delta of need that exists at the moment for Beirut and the suburbs in terms of water that Bisri cannot provide?
Yes. If you want to look at the problem of groundwater in Lebanon, we can notice that the government has absolutely no plan for the management of the aquifers in Lebanon. So the aquifers or the groundwater resources are left for chaotic and private extraction without any assessments, without any monitoring processes, without even surveys of the number of wells. This is really crazy. And we know for sure that if the government proposes and implements a plan to manage our groundwater resources, the efficiency of the use of these resources would really be much better than today. But if we leave the groundwater for this chaotic extraction and overexploitation, we will surely have problems of saltwater intrusion, of exhaustion of some aquifers, that's for sure. But we are saying that if we really manage how we are extracting this groundwater, we will really notice some improvement in this regard. And it's important to mention that Lebanon is abundant with groundwater. More than 50% of the precipitation in Lebanon infiltrates underground, compared to only 20% of surface runoff. So it's a priority to start by proposing solutions for the groundwater before proposing large dams that are costly, inefficient, and have disastrous impact on the environment.
Okay. There's one concern that I've been reading about, and I saw a German report on this, particularly the seismic activity within the Bisri area. But even within, areas like Jeta, I saw some video footage taken by the German Development Authority that were taking basically samples of some of the things that might cause a major collapse of the existing water infrastructure from seismic activity. Does this problem also exist in, they haven't solved the problem in Jeta, but would we also have the same problem in Bisri if we built this dam because of the seismic activity? Is this a relevant problem for Bisri as well?
Absolutely. The Bisri Dam is planned to be built on top of an intersection of two active seismic faults, which poses serious concerns from the seismic point of view, because this massive body of water, when placed on top of an active seismic fault, it will potentially trigger an earthquake activity. And we have to remember that this same fault, the Bisri fault, caused an earthquake in 1956, and the effects were really catastrophic. So we can't mess with the faults in Lebanon. This is really crazy and irresponsible.
Let me talk a little bit about the water quality again. So the Bisri Dam is going to partially or fully get its water from Araon, and if it's not getting it only from Araon, where else is it getting it? And how will the water quality likely be that is going to be conveyed to Beirut and the suburbs?
Yeah. The Bisri Reservoir will be filled with the Bisri River's water. And this water will be conveyed to Joun Reservoir, where it will meet the water that comes from the Karaoun Dam. So both waters will converge in one place, and then they will be conveyed to Beirut. So our concern with the quality of water is mainly because the Karaoun water will meet the Bisri water. And we know that the Karaoun water is contaminated with industrial waste, with cyanobacteria and heavy metals and so on. So it's really extremely contaminated. But on top of that, the water will pass underneath the Naami landfill, because the tunnel is just below the Naami landfill. And there are reports that some material from the landfill, like the liquid that goes out of the landfill, is infiltrating into this tunnel. And there's no treatment of this water after the landfill on the way to Beirut. So there is a serious risk that people in the city and its suburbs will get seriously contaminated water.
Um, the final thing I want to ask with respect to the size of this specific dam, I know from a you know, from a list of all the potential or planned dams that they have, this is going to be the largest. Well, it's tied Bisri with the Khardali one that's also, I believe, planned. Uh, is just a general question here, is the planning of dams per se, is it a comprehensive model? In other words, if you don't build Bisri, does it essentially stop the entire maybe circle of dams being connected to one another? Does it cause something from the entire projects that had been planned not to work? Or is this something that's completely siloed and that's exogenous, and that whether it happens or it doesn't, and maybe other areas might have dams, would not be affected?
Yeah. So are you talking about the connection between the Bisri Dam and the Karaun Dam?
Well,
and the project?
I'm seeing there's close to, I want to say something like 20, maybe 15 planned dams that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's about 11, maybe 11 to 13 planned dams all over Lebanon, in the north, in Ba'a, in the south, and in the Circle Beirut. Are these all going to be connected as a network, or is it?
No, it's not. It's not a network, but it's a network from the political point of view. So if we stop the Bisri Dam, then we are really opening a new chapter in water management in Lebanon. So from this perspective, we can say that they are connected.
Okay. Before I move on to the alternatives, I want to talk about the cost. So the cost of this dam is 1.2 billion. And some of those that are arguing for this dam, meaning they're saying that already hundreds of millions have been spent for this dam. And they are arguing that if we stop now, that means this money would be lost. What is the cost of this? What are the components of this cost? And what would actually be lost versus what hasn't been spent now?
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense to say that because we spent money on an unsound project, on an inefficient project, then we need to continue spending more money on this same project for the amounts already spent not to go wasted. This doesn't make sense.
But is it wasted money? Is it wasted money?
It is. And we believe that people who are in charge of wasting this public money should be held accountable. But we should not continue with this project and spend additional money, because this is really a waste of public money. It doesn't make any sense.
So how much has been spent already?
Yeah, so there's the tunnel that has been built in phases since the 1950s, but this tunnel, which was completed recently, doesn't make any sense from the technical point of view and from water management perspective, because we are building a tunnel to convey water from the south to Beirut, while there are better alternatives for water within the greater Beirut area. So I believe that this tunnel will never serve any purpose or any efficient use. So this is really a waste of...
This is a waste. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's also the money that has been spent on expropriations in the Bisri Valley.
Of land.
So the government basically spent around $155 million on expropriating land in the valley. So the government bought land for very cheap prices, and they expropriated them by force. It's not like the people came to the government and asked them to take the land. So the government came and expropriated the land by force and told the people, there's the money in the bank. If you want to get it, you can go and get it. If you don't want to, then the land is not yours anymore. So they were left with no choice. But today we say that the government can take advantage or can benefit from these lands to invest in them in sustainable agriculture, in ecotourism, in whatever, in establishing a hima or a natural reserve. So it's not wasted because it's a new asset for the government.
Okay.
So the government has now land that can be really useful.
So out of this 1.2 billion budgeted, how much is, you said $150 million has been going to expropriations, and like how much has been in terms of the actual civil works that have been done, or this tunnel that you mentioned? Is that a large amount? Because it doesn't seem to be something that would be too much. And how much is left of that overall budget that has not been provided by the funders, who I believe are the World Bank as well as the Islamic Development Bank?
Let's focus on the costs of the Bisri Dam alone, which is around $625 million, because the remaining of the 1.2 billion is related to the Karaoun project and the tunnel. Okay. So out of the $625 million, only 200 or 250 million were spent already. Okay. So there is around 400 millions that are not spent yet.
Okay. And out of this that's spent, 150 million actually went to expropriating land, so it wasn't complete waste because there's an asset that belongs to
Exactly.
So there's a loss, we could say, of about 100 million so far. Okay. Yes. And the question is whether they go and they waste more, 400 million, or the remainder and requesting it from the World Bank, or whether they do that.
Yes,
okay.
But the costs are expected to increase if the dam is pursued. Why? Because all the material for construction are now more expensive, and there is an important item in the contract with the contractor. It says that they will continue to pay him in US dollars, whatever the situation in Lebanon is. So we don't have dollars in Lebanon. So we can expect inflation and increase of costs and unforeseen conditions on site that will require more loans and more funds to be spent. So we can really go way beyond the 1.2 billion.
Okay. I have here from Omar Badr, he's saying, can we be linked to the scientific dossiers, please? And do we have, a reference that we could provide Mr. Badr and others that might be accessing this webinar so that they can see the scientific evidence on their own? I know in doing the research for this, I came across a lot of data coming from the German Federation, coming from some organizations within the Lebanese government. There was a report that was done in 2015. The World Bank had some reports. But do we have, a place where, we could refer some of these guys for the scientific evidence of this project? Or yes. the counter?
Absolutely. Many of the scientific documents can be found as links on our official social media platforms, Save the Bisri Valley, Untitled Marj Bisri. And people can also send us direct messages asking for more information, and we would be happy to provide them with all the information that is available.
Thank you. So I want to move to our third section now. And I'll remind everybody, if you would like to ask questions, please post your questions on the Facebook page, and we'll be happy to present them to Roland and try and answer them. Alternatives. I want us to kind of look at some of the alternatives with respect, to Bisri as a dam. In the research, that I've, kind of conducted for this interview with you, I kind of came across a lot of solutions that are happening around the world that are much more comprehensive in scope. There isn't a silver bullet, but there does seem to be a tendency to move away from dams. So, and this tendency, particularly in Western countries that maybe as you highlighted in the beginning, were the ones that were pushing for the dams to begin with in the 50s and 60s back then. Now there seems to be a push away from them. In one report here in, in the US, I know a lot of the dams that were built back then are starting to crumble, and they have a huge problem, infrastructural problem of these dams that are starting to crumble. So I want to kind of start with the general in terms of alternatives, and then we'll delve into the specific of the Bisri. The alternatives when it comes to dams, generally speaking, help share with the community what are some of these alternatives and how do they get deployed. And I'll ask a little bit more about cost structures, etc. But give us a little bit of a general answer to begin with, please.
Yes, first of all, we are not against dams totally or against surface water storage. Dams can have different sizes, and there are different types of dams: MAR dams, storage dams, small scale, medium scale, large scale dams. So we're not against all types of dams, but what we're saying is that Lebanon is dominantly covered with karstic limestone rock formations, allowing for excessive water infiltration, which makes our groundwater resources the first and main water resource that we need to invest in. But also, the excessive infiltration of water makes it really difficult to build large dams and isolate the reservoirs, because as we can see in the case of the Bisri Dam, water will eventually infiltrate whatever we do and whatever we try to use techniques for grouting and isolation. So it's a matter of priority. Dams or large dams are not a priority for Lebanon's water management strategy. So if we want to talk about alternatives, we really need a comprehensive, hybrid, low risk and environmentally conscious water management plan that starts with rehabilitating and increasing the efficiency of the distribution network that currently leaks around 40% of the water flow. We also need to reform the groundwater sector and have the state take a charge of extracting the groundwater and distributing it to the people, because it is something related to the common good, to the right of everyone to have access to water. So we shouldn't keep the groundwater subject to chaotic private extraction. We also need to increase the supply from major springs that are near the greater Beirut area. And I'm talking about the Jaita spring, the Kashkush spring, the Antilles and the Shuniyi spring, and other springs that are really within a 15-kilometer radius in the greater Beirut area. So there are many alternatives to the Bisri Dam and to the proposed 15 large dams in Lebanon.
So let me get this straight. These alternatives does not mean that we do anything with Bisri. Bisri remains as is, but these alternatives are closer to around Beirut and can feed the water straight into Beirut, as opposed to having to convey it all the way from Aran or Bisri, etc. Correct?
Exactly. And we would be saving and protecting one of Lebanon's most unique and outstanding valleys.
So let me get this straight, because I'm not a water scientist. I admit my layman approach here, but to me, the underground water in Lebanon seems to be almost like a natural dam that's just sitting underneath our land, and it's protected, it's safe, and it's clean.
Exactly.
Let me ask this question in a different way. Can you manipulate, or not manipulate as a negative term, but work with underground water in the same way, or the same, let's say, malleable way as you can water coming from a specific structure like a dam? Can you turn it on, off anytime you want? Can you supply it for example, in the summer more than you do in the winters. You know, can you do things like that with underground water versus what is promised with a dam as an over surface storage?
Yes. First of all, the advantage of groundwater is first that it's not exposed to sunlight, so it doesn't evaporate, so it is protected underground, and this is really an important criteria for water management in Lebanon. Second, it is less polluted than the rivers. So even if there is some pollution of the aquifers in Lebanon, it is still way less polluted than the Karaun Dam, for example. Also, water institutions or the government in general can really manage the aquifers in a way, just like you mentioned. We can extract in some seasons, we can stop extraction in winter, for example, and leave water to be extracted in summer. So we can treat it really as we treat a dam, but the advantage is that it is protected underground.
Very interesting. I want to discuss some of these alternatives. You mentioned the comprehensive approach, and you mentioned the different springs. I had the chance of looking at the Jita spring. It's a massive amount of water that's flowing from Jita. And that amount of water is flowing straight from the snowy mountains down into Jita and gushing from Jita down to Bayi, and from Bayi into the water authority and into Beirut. There's also pollution that's kind of filtering into those reservoirs. Some people will argue that if we go with solutions that are, you know, kind of exogenous, or that are just filtering water from the mountains, it's going to be more polluted. Is that an accurate statement? Or is the solution more downstream, where yes, you might have some pollution, but it could still be cleaned? Or is the solution upstream as well?
Yes, indeed, we need to solve the problem of pollution in Lebanon. It's not only the groundwater, but also the rivers and streams. All water in Lebanon is more or less polluted. So this must be a nationwide strategy to deal with our sewage and the industrial waste and so on. But if you want to talk about the difference, as I said, between the quality of the groundwater and the quality of the rivers, we can notice that the Jaita spring, for example, provides a much better quality than what the Bisri Dam would provide, for example. Of course, we need to look at the Jaita Springs catchment area as a whole, including the whole Kisrwan and even part of Jubail's region, to try to really implement a plan to treat the water in order for it not to infiltrate as polluted water. But there is a treatment plant in Baye that treats the Jaita's water already. It already exists and provides the greater Beirut area with around 70% of its needs in water.
In the winter time. In the summertime, it starts drying up very seriously.
Yes, exactly.
I have one more question, then I'm going to go to some comments that are being posted on Facebook.
Yes, Wissam, yes. Just 2 seconds, I want to turn off some noise.
Go ahead. I will say a couple of comments then in the meantime. There is a comment from Susanna Jabour that's saying the government has serious problems in being able to follow up and maintain already constructed projects. Shadi Saab agrees with that. Ghada Al-Afendi is saying, how can the World Bank keep funding this corrupted government, knowing so well this country can't pay 1% of its loans? Sheikh Sai says, what do we do if the dam gets hit by a rocket or any kind of an explosive device? Do we build a new one? Is the population safe? This was a question, Roland, that you alluded to earlier, which is what do we do if a dam gets hit by a rocket or any kind of explosive device? Does it get rebuilt, or can you fix a dam that gets? I mean, of course, it depends on the level of the type of damage, but what usually happens in these kinds of scenarios? I know you said there's a human element, which is the flooding for villages, but how do you rebuild a dam that's been bombed?
Do we have to? Do we have to build a dam in the first place?
Let's assume it's there. Is the dams fixable even? I mean, do they get fixed? I mean, is it a security risk is it a geopolitical security risk in your assessment based on some of the other projects that you're seeing in different parts of the Arab world, etc.?
Yes. Well, I'm not an engineer to have a really accurate answer in this regard. But what I know from many historical cases, that when a dam breaches or gets bombed for a reason, it's really hard to rebuild it very, very easily or quickly.
With a structure.
It will be a complex process.
Okay. Zaina Karam is asking, is the tunnel part of the cost of the water augmentation project already spent?
Yes, if you want to talk about the $1.2 billion, a large part of this value was spent on the construction of the tunnel.
Okay. Abdul Halim Jabir states the financial aspect is very crucial. And he says this webinar stands out for this. Jihan Haidar, we can discuss this actual point a little bit later, which is how can the diaspora be more effective in advocating for saving the Bisri Valley?
Sure. Of course, part of our activity is to try to push the World Bank to withdraw its financing for the project. And as we know, the World Bank is a coalition of different states that have shares in these institutions. So if we can pressure these countries in Europe, in the US, in Canada, and tell them that this is, for example, the US taxpayer money, this is the French taxpayers' money. You cannot spend it on such projects in Lebanon that is that harmful, that is financing the corrupt elite in Lebanon. So we have an argument to make in each and every country that are members of the World Bank's Board of Directors. So we can do this through letters, through protests in front of the World Bank headquarters in these countries. We can really make some serious pressure in these countries.
What about internally, Roland? When we've discussed these alternatives that seem rational and seem reasonable, particularly when it comes to pollution, I know there are many different communities in Lebanon, but I doubt any community wants to pollute its own people, because that's like shooting one in their own foot. So has there been an outreach between some of the protester movement and some of these different groups to explain to them the different elements of this project? You know, we're talking about the historic, we're talking the financial, we're talking the environmental, ecological, but also the security element. Has there been an outreach between you guys internally to some of these groups so that they know that you're not coming from any foreign conspiracy of sorts, but rather you're coming from a place of goodness and you're trying to actually do good for their own communities, but also to the country as a whole?
Are you talking about the groups or the communities of the Greater Beirut area?
I'm talking about the overall, the communities in general. I'm talking about the different political groups. I'm not limiting it to anybody really. I'm just, putting it out there. I do know that some people in government are against it, but do the different political groups and has there been an outreach to these?
Yes. Before taking our activity to the current conflictual aspect, we really spent years in trying to convince political groups about the dangers of the project. We met with almost all of them and gave them all the documents, but we really felt that this project benefits many people in power, that it's really hard for the political elite to just abandon this project. So we did our job, and we are continuing to raise awareness about the danger of the project. And I think that the shift in the opinion of some political parties is partly due to the pressure that was made by the campaign and by the local community in the Bisri Valley that has become aware of the dangers of the project, especially with the October 17th uprising, where people really expressed anger and they forced their way in the valley and stopped the contractor from continuing its works. So it was a message to the political parties, especially the ones that are dominant in Shuf and Jizin areas.
Okay. There's a question from Christina Theokaris. She's saying, did the CDR do the studies or was it the World Bank? How are the factors not taken into consideration? This is an important question, I think, in general. The World Bank does projects all over the world. And I have a lot of friends who work in the World Bank and I know a lot of them have their hearts in the right place. Why are they not realizing the potential damage that this could cause and the potential legal implications on the World Bank that it could arise, knowing that just last year, the Supreme Court in the US ruled that they can be sued. And so if this is drawing all this damage on the communities, on the environment, with corrupt practices happening, the World Bank has a real risk of being sued by the communities in US federal court. Why do you think, first, could you confirm who the studies have been made by? And second, why is the World Bank, even still considering the potential legal case that could be made against them in US federal court?
Yes, the World Bank has approved of all the government studies, and they actually financed some of them, and they should have known that the Lebanese institutions do not operate in the transparent and scientific way that one would wish for. So they adopted all the numbers and facts provided by the Council for Development and Reconstruction, which is an institution where the different sectarian political parties come together and share profits through the contracts, through the different, like by hiring their own people to work in these projects. So the World Bank knows that very well, but they didn't expect that a very big campaign will emerge later. They wanted to just finance a project that can serve some purpose, because the bank, what it does is that it gives loans. It's their job. They do not really care about the environment, about the poor, about the climate, and so on. So what they do is that they give loans and they expect it to go really smoothly. And the Lebanese government is really, or knows very well how to deal with international institutions, international financial institutions, because they really need the money. So they are very well prepared since the 1990s. to really provide all the requirements, even in a very formal way, but not really. If we look at the quality of the studies, we will start to notice the flaws and the gaps. So the World Bank adopted all the studies, and today they are stuck with them. They really feel that the project is not serving them anymore. It's causing them a lot of trouble. It's causing them a lot of adverse publicity, but they are trying to figure out a way out of this crisis, especially from the financial point of view, because the party that withdraws from the agreement will have to pay some sort of a fee on that. But we believe that whatever the fee is, the interests of the Lebanese people should be a priority. And the continuing delay by the World Bank of the deadlines they are giving to the government to continue the project is really harmful for all parties. And we are seriously considering filing a lawsuit against the World Bank in the US Federal Court, where the World Bank is based, because the damage that has already happened to Lebanon, to the local community in Bisri, because of the project, is already very high. And if the project will continue and be implemented, we will have catastrophic impact on the local community. And this we won't allow. That's why we are considering potentially filing a lawsuit against the World Bank.
I have a couple of questions here. Thanks for that clarification, Roland. Josiane Abisab is asking, has the Save the Bisri Valley movement proposed a scientific-based alternative to the World Bank and other stakeholders? I know for a fact that you guys appealed to the inspection panel, which is a watchdog inside of the World Bank. And based on the findings of that panel that I saw online on the World Bank, basically they disregarded the appeal. Can you tell us a little bit, share a little bit more with the community about that, please?
Yes, we presented a lot of alternatives to the World Bank management in Beirut, but also to the World Bank's independent inspection panel. And they were completely disregarded by both entities. We presented studies conducted by the German Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources that say clearly that the Jaita catchment area can provide enough water for the greater Beirut area. We also presented many projects conducted or proposed by the UNDP in Lebanon for projects of artificial recharge and managed aquifer recharge. They were also completely disregarded. We told them that it is necessary to invest in improving the management of water in Lebanon, but it's not a project that they would be interested in because they really prefer large-scale infrastructure project, which can be more beneficial from the financial point of view. We also proposed to make some reforms in the institutions, in the administrations of water. It was also disregarded. We proposed to invest in springs other than the Jaita spring, mainly Dayshuniye, Ashoush, Antilles spring. Also, they disregarded this. So basically, they were very attached to the project, and they were always trying to justify it by raising some slogans like it will provide water to 2 million people in Beirut, especially to the poor in Beirut. It will protect biodiversity, and the project will also protect the cultural heritage. And it's all false, because we know that If you build a dam and dismantle more than 50 historical sites, you cannot protect the sites, because if you dismantle, for example, like the Baalbek temple, if you dismantle it and put parts of it in museums, this is not protecting the site. It's
And
the
they plan
opposite
on
of
doing
protecting.
something like that with a church, if I'm not, there's a
Yes,
historic
yes,
church.
yes. Yes, also, they want to destroy all the riparian ecosystem in the valley and say that they will compensate for it by planting trees somewhere else. This is not protecting the environment. So compensation does not work like that. So yeah, so we really felt that they were trying to justify their agreement with the Lebanese government in a very firm and fierce way.
Okay. I wanna talk about. I wanna move to the next and final section of this webinar, which is going forward. First, how long is it going to take them to build Bisri? And if we wanted to compare this against not building Bisri but providing an alternative, the simplest alternative, how
Yes.
long would it take to build that? And what is the cost comparison between the Bisri, the non-Bisri, and the Bisri? Could you give us a simple explanation?
Yes. So the timeline of the Bisri Dam's construction is around 5 to 6 years, but we know for fact that dam construction in Lebanon, most of the time, it doubles the time of construction, because there's always emergent conditions on site, there's always problems with fundings, and so on. Just like the case of the Bisri Dam, the Msailha Dam, the Janni Dam, there's no single dam project in Lebanon that was finished on time. So we can expect around 10 to 12 years for the Bisri Dam project to be built if the project is resumed. But if we compare the Bisri Dam project to other more sustainable projects, like for example, rehabilitating the canal that conveys water from the Jaita Spring to the Bayi water treatment plant, so if we rehabilitate this infrastructure, it will cost around 30 to 40 million dollars, including the building of another canal that doubles the amount of water conveyed from the Jaita Spring.
And how long would it take to build?
It will be around 2 years.
So
maximum.
we're talking 2 years versus 6 to 12 years, and we're
Absolutely.
talking 30 million versus 600 million. Are these the two comparisons?
Yes, we can do this comparison, but we are also proposing solutions that cannot necessarily be quantified in US dollars. When we say that we need to improve the management of the distribution system, when we say that we need some reforms in the administration, when we say that we need to stop the private encroachment on the public network, these are solutions that can start right away, and we can really start to see benefits in months. So it doesn't always have to be large projects and large amounts of money.
The World Bank has already said that, if my understanding is correct, that they are willing to reconsider the allocation of this money for this project to other projects. Do you think this is a serious proposal? And if so, how much, I'll use this term, bang for your buck, can we get in Lebanon for the remaining 300 or 400 million? And can it solve water problems along the lines of these alternatives that we're discussing in many of the different regions of Lebanon? Realizing that there is a law that was developed, if I'm not mistaken, in it's Law 221 of year 2000, per my research, that basically regionalized the water distribution so that it's not all centered, but there's also regional water authorities in the different, I don't know if it's municipalities or muhafazat.
Muhafazat, yes.
How much of this money could be utilized for those kinds of, you know, for all these types of projects? And do you think that is a better approach than continuing with this large one single dam photo op kind of a top of a project?
Absolutely. We believe that the solution that the World Bank is proposing can really be implemented. But the Lebanese government is resisting this option for now. They don't want to reallocate the money elsewhere because many political parties and contractors are benefiting from this project in a way or another. But we believe that it's important to reallocate these amounts of money to deal with the pressing needs of the Lebanese people. Whether it is related to water or to electricity or to any other sector. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to water exclusively. So parts of these funds can be used in the sustainable solutions for water that you already talked about, including the rehabilitation of the Jaita Springs Canal, and other parts of these funds can be used to deal with the problems in electricity or to deal with the problems related to social and food security in Lebanon. So it is based on what the government would decide. But we believe that it's important not to reallocate these amounts of money to similar projects, because we heard that Gibran Bassil wants to use this amount in an airport project in the north, possibly Halad, maybe. I forgot which one, but this is not what we want. We want to use this money for actual solutions to our problems. Yeah, so that's my answer.
Well, we're coming towards the end of this session, and there's a couple of comments here before I pose a couple of final questions. There's Miriam Sphere saying, have you guys tried to raise the issue with the global organizations like Greenpeace and other such global environmental organizations?
Yes, we are already in contact with Greenpeace, with their office in Beirut, and they are very supportive, and we may explore a potential collaboration in the near future.
Okay. I also have a comment here from Zaki Naash. My question is, have we or can we try to work with UNESCO to protect the historic, natural, and cultural heritage of the valley?
Yes, the problem with UNESCO is that it deals primarily with the governments and doesn't give much support for civil society initiatives. And especially if the site is not classified on the UNESCO's list. However, in the case of the Bisri Valley, parts of the valley are actually part of the biosphere reserve of Shuf, like the Cedar Biosphere Reserve, which is classified by UNESCO. So from this point of view, we can reach UNESCO to try to tell them that the dam is harming the biosphere reserve of Shuf. There's also a direct impact on the relation between the Ashmun temple in Saida, which is classified by UNESCO, and the continuity of its landscape, of its cultural landscape that goes all the way up to the Bisri Valley. So the dam is impacting this relation with the temple as well. So from this perspective, also we can reach UNESCO. So yes, it's a potential area to explore.
Okay. I'll pose this final question for you, Roland. is if you had a dream scenario for Bisri and water in Lebanon. Describe that for us. What in your in your vision and in
Yes.
our community vision is the dream scenario for him?
Yeah. Yeah, the Bisri Valley has existed long before us, and it worked very well. We don't always have to envision a particular project for our natural environment, you know. But since many villages are actually connected to this valley, it would be useful uh, to imagine some sort of a plan for this area that encourages sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, that enhances the connection between the different villages, that makes this valley a top touristic attraction in Lebanon and the region. So this is what I dream for the Bisri Valley. Regarding water in Lebanon, we really need to have a serious strategic plan for water management in Lebanon, which we don't have now. We want to think about water as integral part of the environment. It's not a commodity that we can separate it from forests and agricultural land and from all the riparian ecosystems. So we really need to look at water as part of the ecosystem and try to deal with it in a way that it allows us to sustain our water security, but at the same time, we need to protect our riparian ecosystems, our rivers and forests and agricultural lands.
And on this note, Roland, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and explaining to all of us about the Bisri Valley and about the issue of the dam that is being proposed. And we will be sharing this with the larger community in Lebanon and as well as the expats everywhere. So thank you so much for taking the time, and we wish you the best of luck with the Bisri Valley.
Thank you, Wissam.
That's a picture of Bisri, by the way, if you haven't noticed.